And now for our final and still very important session. September is recognized as National Preparedness Month, and fittingly, we are turning our attention now to resilience and being prepared. What risks to American infrastructure are posed by extreme weather? As Jessica pointed out earlier, we are in a moment right now where we need to pay attention and obviously take steps. But we want to know, how are leaders in the private and public sectors working together to ensure this threat is mitigated? To explore that and more, please join me in welcoming to the stage Brian Palish, Managing Director of Government Relations and Infrastructure Initiatives for the American Society of Civil Engineers, Ann Kelly, Senior Director of Policy at CREES, Donnie Colston, Director of the Utility Department for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and Patty Bubar, the Acting Director of the Department of Environmental Protection in Montgomery County, Maryland. The Hill's energy and environment reporter, Tim Kama, will be leading this discussion. Tim, over to you.
All right, thank you, Jack. Thanks to everyone for being here. To kick this off, we had Congressman Fitzpatrick earlier on talking about the Market Solutions Act. He thinks that this is a bipartisan approach to a climate solution. Then we're going to direct this at Ann first. Is this the kind of policy that the business community can get behind?
Thanks so much for the question. And in fact, a number of our business members in Businesses for Innovative Climate and Energy Policy, BICEP, our coalition, really went out of their way immediately to applaud the bill, but primarily because of what it represented. And I was thrilled that Representative Fitzpatrick's remarks this morning. He was candid and inspiring and talking about Republicans needing to embrace science. And I just couldn't be happier with the level of outreach and the constructive work that they're doing. Now, whether or not we get behind this particular design, the business community thinks there's a lot of good things about this design, but it's pretty clear that we need to look at any number of models and then come together and figure out what makes the most sense. There is, as everyone has said today, there's an emerging consensus about pricing carbon as being the most efficient way to tackle climate change. I think we came out suggesting it's a viable bill. It's worth discussion. We look forward to seeing more designs. We look forward to seeing an equivalent package coming out of the Senate. It was great to have Senator Whitehouse here. And then we're confident that we're at a point where we can, through conference, work out a solution. Wonderful to be investing in infrastructure, needless to say. I know we're going to talk about resilience, so that's of great importance. But we are primarily, it's notable that this was a bipartisan effort, that it grew out of the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus. And we look forward to the debate. Great.
This, as you mentioned, it's a climate bill, but it's also an infrastructure bill coming from Congressman Fitzpatrick and Curbelo. So Brian, this is for you. Is this reasonable or a good way to fund infrastructure when there seems to be so much bipartisan agreement, so much agreement among so many stakeholders about the need to find more money for infrastructure? There's agreement that it needs to happen, but so far no way has been found to actually do it. Is a price on carbon something that could be a good way to do it?
It's certainly something we've looked at, and we talked with Congressman Curbelo and have looked at the legislation and think it's bipartisan, it's a step in the right direction. Certainly we have a problem with our infrastructure. We talk about that every 4 years. We have a report card on infrastructure. The grade this last time was a D+. The gap that we have, that we're facing in terms of investment is $2 trillion over the next 10 years. There are not a lot of significant solutions out there that will get us $2 trillion. This is one that goes in the right direction, and certainly it mixes a lot of these ideas together. It does include the idea of being more resilient and sustainable. We need to do that if we're going to spend that $2 trillion. We don't want to build the infrastructure for the last storm, if you will, or for the 1950s. We want to build the infrastructure for the next century and make sure that it can withstand these types of events. So again, finding a way to pay for it is terribly important. Congress has struggled with that for almost my entire time at ASCE, which is about 20 years. So we are still struggling with that. So coming up with new ideas to pay for infrastructure investment that relate back to infrastructure seem to make sense.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So more directly on the resilience front, the current administration seems to be less skeptical about resilience and about mentioning resilience and funding resilience than something more directly like climate change or reducing emissions or what have you. But by the same token, one of the previous administration's most significant resilience policies, the flood standard, got repealed by President Trump last summer. Patty, where does this leave local governments and officials on the ground in terms of having policy direction on this, or is this something that there's good momentum for and significant need for no matter what the federal government does?
Well, thank you for the question, and actually I'm very pleased to be able to represent a local government. I think that speaks volumes to actually have somebody from local government being on this panel, because to echo some of the points that were made by some of the previous folks, and I think Melissa brought this up, it has to be a partnership between local government, state government, federal government, but most importantly, the people that are in these jurisdictions. So I think it's incredibly important to have those partnerships and to not be in conflict. In Montgomery County, we've made incredible progress through pieces of legislation. We have an energy benchmarking law, which requires building owners to benchmark themselves in terms of how much energy they are using, and we publish that. But we also use that information to assist them to be able to find ways to decrease those energy costs. And there's some financial incentives that have been put in place to help the property owners to do that, either through a commercial PACE program, or we have a green bank program. So the legislative branch or the council has gotten behind providing incentives to help people, the commercial sector particularly, reduce their energy cost. Our council passed some resolutions and legislation that is very, very aggressive. It's aspirational, truly, in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And the executive branch submitted a report to them in terms of how challenging that is going to be. It will only happen if there is a partnership between the people, business, federal government, state government, and local government. And if the federal government is moving in a direction that goes in a way that's inconsistent with some of the policies that the local governments are putting in place, it really creates inequities and very, very serious challenges in terms of the business community wanting to locate in those areas, because it's uneven. So, it helps to have solutions at a local, a regional, and a state level to be consistent. But if the federal government is going in the opposite direction, it makes it really challenging.
Oh, makes sense. Donnie, when we're talking about a resilient future and looking forward to what we know climate change will cause, does this present an opportunity for labor, or is this more of a difficulty in trying to figure out what's happening, what's next, and what changes?
Well, it's a huge opportunity for labor. One is as most of you know, labor in general, we have very skilled, middle class with benefit jobs. All of our apprenticeship programs are focused on how do we provide the reliability and resiliency of the grid. When that business is running, you don't want any line to shut down. That customer turns that light on, you don't want to flicker. So that's our main focus, is how do we prepare our members and our employers, employees, to be able to prepare for that. So being part of that discussion for organized labor is huge for us, as in to be part of it, as we already understand the process, we already understand the infrastructure that needs to be in place, and we know the skills that need to be in place to be able to move forward. Mm-hmm. So being part of that discussion of climate into the future. The challenge for us is how do we move our workers and our members from a middle-class income job inside of a generating facility into a green type of job, and what type of apprenticeship programs do we move over to provide that job and still keep the resiliency of the grid and or the reliability of the grid in play.
I see. To extend on that, Donnie, what are you looking for from the federal government when it comes to planning for that resilient future? And is the current administration and or the current Congress providing that, or do you need more from them?
Clearly, we are of the opinion that the only one that can solve this solution is Congress. Be able to move forward with an energy bill that addresses not only the resiliency, reliability, but climate in general as it moved forward. And in the present state that we're at right now, that's not moving forward. All right, there's pretty much a gridlock on how do we move forward in the climate industry. But that doesn't mean that our employers, the utilities themselves, aren't still moving forward with how do we have clean energy? How do we change our generation? How do we prepare our worker for the next? So we are in constant communication with the legislators saying that any legislation that comes through has to address this. But being able to move that pendulum in Congress right now, that's the only way you're going to be able to do it. So it has to be done at a federal level. I know that each state is addressing it. Each utility is addressing how to address it, but there's very little movement when you talk about the federal level.
I see. Brian, for engineers and for others in the infrastructure space, where's the line between reasonable resilience standards that can make sure that infrastructure is built for the next decade, the next 4 decades, what have you, and something that's simply burdensome and overly costly and doesn't actually solve that problem?
That's probably a very good question. So thank you for asking. I think part of it is, I think it's probably twofold. One is understanding what the risks are. So we need to have a better understanding of what those risks might be. If you're in California, you're going to probably build for earthquakes, right? You're going to address seismic things. If you're in South Florida, if you're in Congressman Corbella's district, you've got sea level rise clearly. And so, but it's knowing. I think some of what we're learning is some of the models that we are currently using may not be correct. We have an administration that currently is underspending on redoing flood maps. Having up-to-date flood mapping technology and capabilities is terribly important at the local level. If you're going to do development, you need to know what the 100-year flood is, and we may have a different definition of what a 100-year flood is at this point. If a 100-year flood happens every year, maybe that's not a 100-year flood. That's my non-scientific answer to that, but it does say it all, right? And it's not terribly engineering. But I also think it's also educating the owners and talking to the owner of the infrastructure and finding out what they are willing to, what they want to do with that asset. We've spent a lot of time recently talking about something that's not terribly sexy, which is life cycle cost analysis. If you actually build your infrastructure if you build it differently up front, you may end up lowering your operations and maintenance costs. At the local level, I think you'd agree, Patty, no one has enough money for O&M. City budgets and local budgets are strapped in that way, and so building something to last longer may reduce your O&M, but it actually might also save you money in the long term. So maybe you're not necessarily overbuilding, shall we say. And so I think having those conversations about what the risk is, knowing what those risks are, and then also talking about what the intended use is and looking at those life cycle costs and trying to minimize some of that later O&M, if you will.
Right, makes sense. Shifting gears slightly, Ann, clean energy is also something that gets a lot of bipartisan support relative to resilience. Those are both areas that get a lot of stakeholder support, bipartisan support. How is this connected in the conversation of making sure that no matter what the future actually holds, we can prepare for it, do something good about it, and get enough political support behind it to actually make something happen.
Well, your question is really timely because this afternoon I'll be speaking at the Conservative Clean Energy Summit, which is going on as we speak. There's a tremendous panel at this moment about why advocating for clean energy is as American as apple pie. There's no question that at the state level, and I hear what all the comments about Washington, it's fun to not talk about Washington when you're in Washington, actually. There's just tremendous work going on at the state level. As Melissa noted in the previous panel, the business case for clean energy has completely transcended the politics. There's just no question about that. And this afternoon, I'll be on a panel hosted by the Christian Coalition, highlighting some of our major energy purchasers, Microsoft and Mars in particular, who've been in states, they're in red states, they're procuring renewable energy at large volumes. To Senator Whitehouse's point, those purchases in and of themselves send a political signal. They send a political signal to state legislators. They send a political signal to Washington. Those companies are actually also lobbying for clean energy, for the removal of the barriers to procurement of clean energy at the state level. Now, your question gets at, well, by definition, is that not then more resilient? Is a clean, diversified energy portfolio more resilient than one that is fossil fuel-based? I think we all know the answer to that. So does resilience come up in the conversation? All the time. Disasters like what we saw last year, we're in the middle of hurricane season, leads to business interruptions of supply chain, perhaps most importantly, interruptions to families, communities, workers. I'm so happy that Donnie is here to talk about a resilience discussion because too often we don't talk about the labor force, and we need a resilient, talented, well-paid workforce as we move into a low-carbon economy. So thank you for being here.
Thanks. Patty, you had mentioned some of the actions that Montgomery County has taken to further clean energy. As neither the federal nor state government, but nonetheless a government that's close to the people, how does such local decision makers play into that conversation? What's the role there?
Well, the local decision makers, I think, are representing what they think is the will of the people. And so I think there's, a lot of support from the public in Montgomery County to be able to do these kinds of things. But we're also seeing a lot of businesses coming around. A lot of businesses, and I think it was Congressman Fitzpatrick who said, economic development and protecting the environment are not mutually exclusive. And I think that's just an important thing for us to say. And the more the conversations revolve around that, I think the more that becomes a guiding principle. And so we have several businesses in the county who very much believe in that, and they're leading the way. And they're kind of setting that example. And as you said, then that becomes something that just becomes a little bit more mainstream, a little bit more, and it just continues to build on itself. So I think between the elected officials at the executive and the legislative branch in the county, representing what they think is the will of the people, to actually have the business community be able to grab onto that and do more speaks volumes. As I mentioned, the county itself, through our buildings, we've really achieved some great efficiencies in terms of energy, but that doesn't make as big a difference as commercial building owners or people deciding to take public transportation or not driving their cars or having electric vehicles. So the elected officials can set policies, but the people and businesses have to help lead the way also.
Great. So we have time for a handful of questions. As Senator Whitehouse said, everything's pretty dark out there, so raise your hands and direct questions to individuals if you can, or otherwise not.
Good morning. My name is Alexander Gunnarsson. I'm a student at the George Washington University, and my question is about making more resilient electrical grids. As we saw in Puerto Rico, it took a very long time to restore power to certain parts of the island in response to the hurricane. And my question is, how can we build more resilient grids in the future in response to larger storms and more maybe unpredictable weather events?
Does anybody want to take that? Maybe.
Well, I think clearly Florida's leading the way there. As the number of hurricanes and the number of outages that happen each year is in hardening the system and preparing for that unexpected, let's say the California fires, the hurricanes in the Gulf, and or high winds or whatever the case may be. But the building a stronger, tougher infrastructure when you talk about distribution and transmission is the key point there. You can't set wooden poles and then expect them to withstand the wind and the hurricanes and the fires and so on and so forth. So Florida moved to a more resilient system, as in setting concrete poles. Can they withstand it? Can the wires? If you put the wires underground, will it have an effect on it? It's easier to, it's not easier, it's a lot more costly to put them underground, but in some application you can move them underground. But you need to be able to put the infrastructure in place of what you're expecting that disastrous effect would be.
Yeah, I'm really glad you raised this, and you're going to see a lot more, I think, on grid modernization in the next year or so. There's just no question that there's an emerging consensus that we need a reliable, responsive, smart grid that is built for the 21st century, and we're a long way from getting there. But there's an emerging consensus that that needs to happen on a nationwide level, some really robust conversations going on. It couldn't be more important, and this is why we need your folks to start to think about that. And we should know what is a smart grid and what isn't. What is actual grid modernization? So you have to be really careful about our definitions. What is simply a mask for maintenance and not actually robust grid modernization that's going to really take us to where we need to go, and be responsive to a full range of energy choices. In addition to that, just on resilience, I would be remiss, we haven't talked about land use, and it's really important. As we looked at the review of what happened to Houston last year, we really have to look carefully at the Clean Water Act and our land use policies. You pay paradise, you put up a parking lot, you're going to have hell to pay. And that's what's happened. The wetlands are the natural sponges that we need to absorb water. We put up impermeable surfaces, and that's just going to be a big problem.
All right, well, that's about all the time that we have. So thank you, panelists, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of our program for this morning. On behalf of the Hill and our sponsors, PG&E Corporation and National Grid, and our partner, the Bipartisan Policy Center, I'd like to thank all of you in the room for joining us today, and even those on the live stream. If you missed any portion of the event today or discussion, the full event video will be available on thehill.com shortly. As a reminder, we do ask to fill out the event feedback surveys that were on your chair. You can hand those out to anybody on our staff leaving the building. And finally, we'd like to see you again next week, in fact, on September 13th, for another bipartisan-centric conversation entitled Leadership in Action, the Hill's Newsmaker Series, which will feature Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar and Republican Congressman Peter King. Thank you all, and have a great day.